Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Community Corner here with Children's Health Defense. My name is Aimee Villella McBride. I'm an advocacy liaison with CHD, and I share this show with Stephanie Locricchio, my colleague and other advocacy liaison. So this week, we are bringing you jam-packed information and resources, and it could not come at a more important time. So the big news of today, as many of you probably have heard, is that Pfizer was granted full FDA licensing and approval for the COVID-19 vaccine for ages 16 and up today. And this is very concerning news because we know that the clinical trials are still underway. And we know that the criteria that's needed typically in order for these manufacturers to receive FDA approval has not been met. And we know that with this now stamp of approval from the FDA, it's going to push more and more mandates across the country, from state to state, whether it's federal employers or workers, whether it's the healthcare workers, the entire healthcare industry, and of course, the greater concern for children as well that many parents across the United States have right now, especially those who sit and live in states that do not have their exemption rights as they were taken away from a number of states in the last few years. So we know that with this, there's going to be a huge influx of parents. We're hearing about it all over the country. Both Stephanie and I are receiving so many stories. We know more and more families who are now saying, well, what will we do? And they're considering now pulling their kids, unenrolling them from either public or private schools and homeschooling. So we actually want to feature some experts on homeschooling tonight, so we can all discover the beauty and the joys of homeschooling. But before we bring on our guests, we want to kind of feature some of the current events and news that's happening. As these mandates push out further and further, the people continue to rise. There are protests and rallies happening state to state all over the country. And just the other week in New York City, after Mayor de Blasio pushed forward the mandate for all indoor dining, restaurants, theater, gyms, that the vaccine would be mandatory, there was a huge protest in the city. And there was a phenomenal speaker, a teacher who spoke out. And we just want to show that footage now to kind of show the people rising and pushing.
I am a product of public school education. I am also a single mother of a very bright, smart, common sense having, critical thinking, guarded up, 17-year-old young man who knows the difference between propaganda and truth. And it wasn't because of me. He saw who I was, but God gave him the rest. And I thank God that he's like that. He graduated high school. They tried to take that away from him through remote learning by giving him the downgrade of education. He graduated.
Yeah, we're having some technical difficulties with that.
Okay.
I don't know why it's not coming on, but it worked before. All right, let me remove.
We'll have to show that online. It'll be on our site. But this was such a ferocious mama bear speaking up about her son, talking about how, you know, he got through the public school system, but still had those critical thinking skills and could call out the propaganda, can call out all this shameless coercion that was happening and the manipulation and the lies. And then she also spoke to how she had a very lengthy and successful teaching career with the NYC DOE, but was willing to walk away from it all if the vaccine became mandatory, which it did today. So just today, it was announced that NYC DOE teachers would now be mandated to take this vaccine in order to keep their jobs, with no exceptions and no allowable exceptions for testing either. So that's happening in just a few short weeks. And on Wednesday in the city, there is a huge protest against all the mandates by all of the unions standing up together. So at City Hall at 4 p.m. on August 25th, it's going to be the largest protest ever. Every single union will be represented. So whether it's NYPD, whether it's the firefighters, the teachers, every union worker, EMTs, EMS, nurses, healthcare, you name it, we need you there. So this is going to be a huge event. Stephanie's going to be there, right? Covering live on the ground in New York and covering it. And we really need people there. So if you're in the city, around the city, tri-state area, spread the word. If you know anyone who works in the unions, please spread the word and help us get a good audience there.
We absolutely need people on the ground right now. There are so many protests happening this week. I almost can't keep up with the influx of information that's happening. So we have a lot happening here in New Jersey for all my New Jersey people, and stuff is happening all over the world. We get a lot of information from the states that we live in or formerly lived in Aimee's case. Tomorrow, we have some things happening in New Jersey. We know right now rumblings are coming out of the Murphy administration that they're going to be following in line with New York is doing, mandating vaccines on all teachers and workers inside of the schools. So we're just waiting. And with this FDA licensure coming today, it certainly clears a pathway for a lot of states that maybe have been on hold to implement such things. So tomorrow, if you're in the area, Trenton, the beautiful thing about New Jersey is that Trenton is so close. So tomorrow at 11 a.m., we're going to be down at the State House Annex at 11 o'clock, and we're going to be marching over to the Department of Education in peaceful protest to really stand against mandates in general. Obviously, we know that the masks are mandated here in New Jersey already. Governor Murphy already made that announcement. But we're also anticipating vaccine mandates being placed on our teachers first and then our children. So we need to act in advance. Being proactive right now, I cannot stress enough how important it is to be out there before this hits home. What we see all the time is people don't show up until the moment it's at their doorstep and they've been impacted directly. And I understand how difficult it is to make arrangements with your children and to be at these protests. But the sooner we act together and unite, the less chance we'll have of these things being implemented. So make it a priority to be there. We had some amazing footage also. Hopefully this video will cooperate with us, but we had some amazing footage in my old stomping ground, Staten Island, at Northwell University Hospital, which I've frequented a couple of times living in that area. And it was so powerful to see these nurses acting in peaceful non-compliance, saying, you are not going to mandate this on me. And I'm going to show the video because they actually rolled out this banner, which was almost like a sign of distress, like SOS, save us now. So it's powerful to see how many people are coming out. And you have to ask yourself, if healthcare workers are saying that they don't want this, what do they know that we don't know? That people that are lining up, why is it that people that are in the medical profession that should be believing this with all of their heart and their soul saying, not now, I'm not doing this now, I'm not ready, it's not happening. So let me add this in so you guys can see the powerful.
We're at Staten Island University, Northwell Health Hospital, and they hung it out the window. God.
Powerful. Yeah. I mean, there's healthcare workers all around the country, all different states declining this, and for many different reasons. Maybe they already had COVID and they fully recovered and they know they have antibodies. Maybe it goes against their faith-based beliefs. Maybe they just don't want it. And unfortunately, they're not being given that choice. So now they have to make the difficult decision. Do I keep my job and risk possible injury or harm, or take something that I know I don't want? It's just an awful, awful predicament for them to be in. So my heart goes out to anyone who's facing these mandates. And we'll talk a little bit at the end of this episode on the tools and resources we have available here in CHD to fight these mandates.
There are so many tools and resources. So if you're in this position and you're hearing this information and it speaks to you, definitely wait until the end of the show, because we never want anyone to feel like their backs are against the wall and that they have to put something into their body that they don't feel comfortable with or that they don't believe in. So stay tuned. And if you are a parent who is dealing with the mandates in the school nearby you, this show is something that you're absolutely going to want to get a pen and paper and take some notes, because the information that will be shared will absolutely be a resource for you as we move into the coming school year. So I'm going to turn it over to Aimee to bring on our guest.
Absolutely. So we know these mandates are a potential threat for all children. And so parents everywhere are now looking into homeschooling for the very first time. And for many parents, this can seem very daunting, very overwhelming. They may just not even know where to start. And, you know, homeschooling has such joy and beauty to it. I homeschooled my children for the last 2 years in New York and really discovered the beauty of it. My children were so nourished, grew so much just academically, socially, even in their faith. It was really a beautiful experience for those 2 years. The first year definitely was rough, though, I will admit that. As a first timer, you don't know what you're doing. You're going to make mistakes. There's going to be bumps in the roads, but you learn and you grow as a family. So I have the pleasure to bring on a wonderful guest, Cassandra Mulligan. Cassandra is a mother of 5 children with 16 years of homeschooling experience. She homeschooled her eldest 3 all the way through to high school and continues to homeschool her youngest 2 children now. She has experience in homeschooling her children one-on-one, in community with others, and also deep experience in guiding and mentoring other parents all throughout the state on how to homeschool. Cassandra, in the last year, recently founded and directed a very vibrant and Christian classical education model homeschooling community in New York, which I had the pleasure of being a part of with my children. It was truly a phenomenal experience. And she's a graduate from NYU Stern School of Business. She left a thriving publishing career after 15 years to homeschool her children, and she's never looked back. So welcome, Cassandra, and thank you for being on the show.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. We're excited to have you on. So could you tell us a little bit, obviously parents making that decision, whether to go into homeschool their children or not, it's a very big decision to make. And so now parents are at a different point where they're kind of feeling pressured into it. Maybe they don't have a choice, but tell us a little bit about, your background, so when you made that decision 16 years ago, what was that moment for you that made you decide you wanted to homeschool your children?
Well, I was perfectly content having my kids stay in the private school that they were in. It was a beautiful private school on Long Island, and they were little. My oldest child was in 2nd grade, and I had a kindergartner. And my 2nd grader began exhibiting anxiety. My reasons were so different from everyone's reason today. I just saw changes in my children's behavior. So my 2nd grader started biting her nails, having a lot of stress about testing and getting up in the morning. She was 8 years old to study for her math facts test and going to bed so late, and I couldn't make her fear go away. And then my kindergartner, who's my 2nd child, was getting in trouble every day. She was very vivacious, and she just could not please her teacher. She was full of life, full of love, and she just would not comply to just stay sitting all the time. So I saw my 2 children in this beautiful school that I would have happily worked to pay the tuition, just not thriving in the environment. So I really, out of indignation, a mom, like a mama bear, I just was away from them the best hours of their day. And I decided I'm going to homeschool. And it had never been a thought in my mind. It was something I thought was strange. I was not that typical person to say homeschooling is for me. But because of what happened to my kids, I took about 6 months to research. I read a book called The Well-Trained Mind by Susan Wise Bauer. A lot of homeschool veterans recommended it to me. And I went on a cruise with my husband, and for the whole week I took notes, came back, met with their teachers, and told them that we'd be homeschooling. And it's really interesting. The 2nd grader's teacher, they were both wonderful people. She was so upset for my oldest daughter because she was a very good student. She was a sweet child. She would stay with the teacher and help her. Her anxieties were shown at home. And the kindergartner, her teacher said, "Who's going to teach your daughter how to raise her hand?" So isn't that interesting? Those were the 2 takes on these teachers. And today I would say that the oldest one is 24. I mean, an incredible woman in so many ways. We worked together. If I could travel the world, I'd travel with her. Really, it was the best thing we ever did for all of our children. And our 2nd daughter is a graphic designer, vivacious, full of life, full of love, a dancer, an artist, and she would have really been stifled. So God knew that I needed to begin that journey out of a mother's indignation, because I would have never done it unless I got mad. I got mad. So that's how I started.
Yeah, sometimes it takes a push, right, in order to discover that blessing and what's
the push,
actually better.
Yes, and the push for parents today, remote learning, what did that do? This last year has been horrible. So you see, we tried something and there have been so many negatives to that. Or this whole the things with the vaccines, the masking. So there's other reasons why communities are coming into wanting to homeschool their kids. My reason back then, that was my reason. It was great blessing. The fruit in our family has been incredible. And I've never looked back, like you said, never, ever look back on the hardest days. we still plotted through, and, I'd even threaten them sometimes, okay, we're getting in the car, you go into public school, on the really rough days. Because at the time I had 4, and then I got pregnant the year I started homeschooling, which is a whole nother story. I was not thinking I was having any more children. And then I'm very thankful for that, because it calmed me down, because you should have seen my classroom. It was scary. But being pregnant, having morning sickness made for a much more gentle introduction to homeschooling for my children, and really taught me, I learned so much more about how to be a mom, just being able to homeschool.
Right. And being present for your children. I think
Being
that's a big
present for them.
lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
I was working part-time by that time. And I did stop working completely when I started homeschooling. I was able to do that. And I know everyone isn't able, but there are options. There are other things that you can do.
Tell us a little bit about what that transition was like. So you had a thriving career in publishing.
Yes.
You worked for one of the top, media companies.
I did.
So you walked away from all of that, and then you started to homeschool your kids. So how did that work personally for you as a transition, and how did the children acclimate? How long did it take for them to kind of get used to this new day-to-day routine?
Okay. We have to realize as women, we want to do it all. And for me, at the time, I'm a little older than you ladies. At that time, working full-time in corporate America, as it is, it's changing a little now, but it was what you did. No matter how many kids you had, that was a badge of honor. And I was really, it was very important to me. As I had more children, I had my mother living home with me. I was very spoiled. I really had it made. I could not do it all well. And I got to the point where I had too many bosses. I had my boss at work. I had my husband. I had my children, in a sense, my mother. And something had to give. So I was ready to walk away. So for me personally, I was really ready. My husband had wanted me to work less for years, and I was really pushing back against him. I was traveling a lot. It put a lot of stress on the marriage. Like I said, I couldn't be as great a mom because I wasn't home a lot of the time. I was traveling, every month, even when I was part-time, because I had taken over meeting planning. So I was all over the country. So I was ready to stop. I had 4 children. I was a little older, and I just had worked there 15 years, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. So I was ready. But then it wasn't like I stopped working. I went from working in corporate America to all of my focus into my homeschool. So you have to understand that for me, I didn't just half-heartedly homeschool. I was researching constantly. I was putting together curriculum, putting together my classroom. I really never did a boxed curriculum per se. I would pick and choose things that I wanted to teach my children. I got bored really easily. So every year we would learn new things. I didn't always stay with the same curriculum. So I was always very busy, and immediately upon homeschooling, even before I started homeschooling, I started going to local homeschool meetings. I was meeting people, but that's the type of person I am. I needed to have support. I needed to know that I can meet people to be friends with my kids. My daughter only went from kindergarten to 2nd grade. So she had only 3 years under her belt, and my second child had only 1 year, and the rest had never went to school. It was hardest for the oldest, even though she was only 8 years old. So I do empathize with moms who are coming out now, homeschooling 14-year-olds, homeschooling 10-year-olds. Yes, there is a transition, but we've still got to do it. It doesn't mean we don't do it. It means we still just need to, and every transition is different with our children. So we have to really meet them where they're at. And I always say, for that first year, get to know your child, really get to know their learning style. You haven't been educating them, so you don't know. So you need to take that time, especially if they're teenagers, really to go out to lunch with them, talk to them. Let them be part of the process of picking curriculum, of choosing a co-op. Let them, have a little bit of ownership. For the little ones, just love them. Love them, be understanding, try not to lose your cool. Really, that this first year is a healing year, because the way I really personally feel is being in institutionalized education is a detriment. Even before all of this, that kind of model is difficult for children. There's a lot of bullying going on. There's a lot of keeping up with the Joneses, and it's not a gentle atmosphere for the most part. So there's a lot of healing and a lot of kind of retraining not only your mind, but your child's mind that, okay, we're going to do this at home, and mommy or daddy or grandma, whoever's in charge of the education, they do have authority to teach you, and we're going to do this together. And you know what, mom and dad, you're the lead learners because we don't know everything. It's not about managing a classroom. It's about learning alongside your child. So I hope that answers the question a little bit.
It absolutely does.
Definitely.
And I tell you, being on the precipice of, for the first time in my life, ever considering the option of alternative schooling methods. My son will be 14.
Yes.
It's been the typical thing of we walk you to school, we drop you off, you get on the bus, and you come home at 3 o'clock. So we've been lucky enough to find a co-op that offers some hockey and some academics. So he will be with other children. But it's really overwhelming, just the slight disruption in schedules and all the things that go into what you take for granted, in the sense that the curriculums, everything was done for you. You didn't have to think about any of this. You just dropped your child off. They were in the care of your teachers. It was kind of like a partnership in learning. And now it's all on us, the parents. So there are a lot of myths that I'm learning right now about homeschooling. And I've been guilty of thinking them myself. You hear about homeschooling and it's like, okay, well, these kids aren't socialized. Are they going to have the same opportunities academically in college when it comes time to apply for scholarships and things of that nature? And then also, let's not forget the stain that virtual learning left on the whole quote unquote homeschool, because I know for my son, he correlated the thought of what that virtual learning experience was to homeschooling. And we know that it's very, very different. So can you speak a little bit, since you've had so much experience and you have so many children of different ages, can you talk a little bit about some of the common myths and what your experience and the other experiences that thriving community that you've created have been so far?
Okay. So I will speak that they are myths. So the socialization one, we don't, walk into rooms with all second graders, right? And do life, or all seventh graders, or it's socialization in the industrialized model is improper socialization. You really need to own that. And I own that very early on. A really smart mentors in my life in homeschooling, kind of in forums like this, live, we didn't really do this back then, really explain that to us. And it clicked right in my head that, yeah, it doesn't make sense. I remember when I was going into high school, not so much when I was younger, but when I was going into high school, being so intimidated and scared of the upperclassmen. And I remember upperclassmen being a little bit bullying. Is that correct? Should it be that way? Absolutely not. In our community, just because, we created this community 2 years ago, the kids are so beautiful to each other. I have pictures of in our yearbook of our one senior. We had a senior sign up, and he's playing chess with a second grader at lunch. And she loved him. And this is kind of collaborative living life together in your family. I have children of all different ages. We did life together. Speaking to socialization, I have some of my kids are shy. Some of them are very outgoing. And especially I told you the story of my first child and my second child, so different challenges. That doesn't really change that much. I mean, kids' temperaments are kids' temperaments. Socialization is what the parent will bring to the table. So it's on you, mom. It's on you, dad, to create those environments where you're with family, you're with friends that you trust with your children. So you make the socialization. If you're going to keep your child home away from everyone, they're not going to be socialized. If they're just going to be stuck to the Xbox or the iPad, that's not good either. You have to create those times with friends and families, bringing them to rallies, bringing them to important things, bringing them to government meetings, bringing them to the supermarket. So I feel like socialization is kind of the one thing that's asked about the most, but the least important. There are so many more important things to address with homeschooling, as far as the myth is, are they going to be able to, graduate high school? I have 5 children, 3 are in college. 1 took the SAT, 2 didn't have to. They all have, 1 had 3.9 grade point average. The other ones have 4.0 grade point averages. Is that because they're so brilliant? I think they're really smart, but that's real. They didn't do super. 1 only took the SAT. She did pretty well, she didn't get a perfect score by any means, but they learned how to work through the homeschool. We taught them a work ethic. They watched mom really work hard putting together a homeschool. I demanded, a lot of them. They watched dad work every day, to provide for us. we built in our children and work ethic. This has to go back onto the parent. We relinquish our kids into the system, and then look at the outcome of the system pretty much. I mean, we trust this system. Look what's come out of it. Look at all of these stats that come back for the public school system. It's not very good. And if you look at the stats, and I said some to you, Aimee, I guess that can be another show, just the statistics of success in homeschooling. And you do have your bad homeschools. You do. There are homeschools that are not run well. So, I'm not going to say it's perfect, but if you're a mom or dad or whoever you put in control of their education and you love and care for your children, you want them to do great. You want them to succeed. Other myth, the parent, they homeschool in their PJs all day. Yeah, sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. It's not a big deal. Other myths, mom, the parents do the tests for their kids or they don't test their kids. Do you think parents don't want their kids to succeed? Why would we cheat? These are the things that I keep saying to people who say these things. You have to look at the product. I was speaking to Aimee about the fact that my two oldest daughters, 24 and 22, spoke at a homeschool conference last week. They were the highlight of the meeting. I could have just left and not said any more, because they sat and they gave such incredible words of wisdom to the moms and dads listening, and they answered the questions so well, and it's what the parents had to hear. Because when you look at the outcome, I can do a lot of talking. I can tell you how incredible it is, because it is. But you have to look at the product to see, how incredible it is. So that's kind of a little bit on that.
I have to tell you, when we've done some of these protests in New Jersey, the first time I ever went to a New Jersey health committee meeting, I had the privilege of interviewing 4 homeschooled boys. And every single time I interview or am in contact with anyone who's been homeschooled, first of all, their commitment to being at the protest and really being engaged in the conversation and understanding the whys behind what we're doing is remarkable at all ages. It's really impressed me quite a lot. So I think there's a lot to be said with what you just talked about, because we have all these beliefs about what it's supposed to be, what it's supposed to look like, this indoctrination that even parents, you hear about this concept of unschooling. It's like we have to actually unschool our children to recognize that, this is the other myth, that you need to spend 6 hours a day homeschooling your kids.
Right.
And that's not necessarily true at all.
Right.
Right. It's not, especially for little guys. I mean, little ones, you're starting in kindergarten, first grade, an hour and a half a day, go play. Go play, get through the coursework, go play. As they get older, definitely more hours. Your 14-year-old, it's going to be probably 4 or 5 hours a day hitting the books. And at that age, sometimes I have a 15-year-old son, bless his heart, he has 4 big sisters, and love this kid. He is so smart. But it's a challenging age. We have to recognize that these kids they're growing up in a really tough time. We didn't have to grow up in times like this. We really did not grow up in times of serious war. We're really in a war, and our kids have been really wounded, and we have to be patient. We have to kind of run with them. I'm probably was a lot harder on the girls than I am on him, just because I don't want to push him completely away. So there's a lot of, you have to know your child, and he's brilliant. I get him in the room. I know he does his stuff. He reads his work. If he's not doing it the way I want him to do it at the time I want him to do it, it's okay. We kind of have to, and also we learn to kind of release our children as they get older. So we have to release them. By the time a child's 14, they should be able to kind of independently work, put together their own scheduling. We really want to train them. That's part of homeschooling too. As just to give you, a metaphor, at some point we don't have to tie our kids' shoes anymore, right? At some point, earlier than that, we don't have to feed them anymore. Different things, they learn how to do themselves. So the goal in homeschooling is to create an independence alongside a love of learning. And you are in such a great position because your son is 14, and I'm sure he has interests. There's things that he wants to learn more about. There's gifts that you see in him already. Like, wow, he's really good at that. He's really good at this. And when you homeschool your child, you can literally, the sky's the limit with those things. We have parents who have their kids, up in planes, riding planes when they're 15, taking pilot lessons. There are things that you can do that you never would have been able to do had they been in public school, because there's just no time. There's so much time with changing of classes and all this stuff that they have to learn that really it's not going to help them in life. It's actually antithetical to truth, so as a Christian, I have been able to teach my kids truth, and that's why my kids know how to think. That's why my kids were able to sense a lie for a lie early on in all of this nonsense. They could see it. What's going on? It wasn't just mom having to convince her kids. I'm so blessed that I have a household. I have 5 children and a husband, and we're all on the same page. And that's not groupthink. That's truth think. They disagree with me on plenty, but on these foundational matters, because they've been trained to, like that mama was saying, critically think, those girls can run circles around most adults and my son. So, and they get that, mom and dad too. They're like, well, why are you saying that? We've they, and it's okay. We have those conversations. So it is a blessing to have our family actually intact and together. And that's another incredible thing, the closeness built in our family. We really love each other, even going through the teenage things, and we went through things, but we love each other and would do anything for each other. We support each other. We don't agree on everything, but there is such a family bond, and homeschooling did that. If we didn't homeschool, my kids would have been off in different grades, having their own sets of friends. We had friends who we were friends with the parents. So we really knew what was going on in the house. We weren't just sending our kids off somewhere that we don't even know who the parent is. Think about this. You're sending your kids off to school and they have a teacher. And do you know anything about that teacher's life? Sometimes you do, but most of the time you don't know what they're into. You don't know anything about them. And they're having the best hours of your child's day. You get them when they're cranky, you're getting them up to go to school. And then you have to force them to do homework after school when they're exhausted. You're the bad guy all the time, 5 days a week. So the model is just off. It just doesn't create for a harmonious home. So homeschooling is so much better. And it just brings a lot more peace. As moms, we can be not peaceful. I know we can just have our raw moments, but really we just have to intentionally be the heart of our homes, especially when you're homeschooling. It's so important. And also I always say this, women who are out there watching, I don't know if it's mostly women, mostly men, but your husband needs to be on board. It's really difficult, very difficult if the wife is pushing, the husband's like, no, no, no. So I think because of the times we live in, we're getting kind of a more united front, which I hate what's going on in the world. But the good thing about it is mom and dad both are seeing this is not good for our child, and they're willing to take the risk. And you know what? You could try it for a year.
Yes, that's exactly
a year's not doing anything. You could try it for a year. Most people don't go reverse and put their kids back in school, but you try it for a year, and it's the best decision I ever made. And I wasn't homeschooled. I'm a product of the public school system. So I have to, if I can't say enough how it's the right way. We are the ones who are to give our kids education and truth, and we're equipped. We're equipped. A woman told me a long time ago, God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called. We're called to do it. He's going to equip us, and we're going to be able to do this thing. It's not easy. You will cry. You will have really rough times, but you're going to have the most amazing times where you will cry because it's so amazing. And especially with the littles, Aimee, you have your little still, and when they read their first words, and just things like that, you just get to be part of that. And for your 14-year-old, oh my goodness, it's going to be amazing. Really, really good.
Feel the love and the passion just exuding when you talk about it.
Because I believe it because I know it. I've seen it.
I can feel it. I feel it. And I have to tell you, I've had some conversations with my 14-year-old, and it's funny because going into high school, one of the electives that he was really interested in called entrepreneurship was something that was not available because not enough children had interest in it. So I said to him the other day, we really have a power that we've never had before, because we can decide the type of learning that you'll do, the type of curriculum that we invite into your schooling experience. So together as a family, we can look at all the different options and make a decision so that you get to choose what your day looks like when it comes to what kind of learning you're doing. But I have to tell you, along with that blessing is this extreme feeling of overwhelm. Because there are so many curriculums that every time I go on the computer now, obviously Facebook knows that I'm searching for curriculum. So every time I sign on, there's a new ad for a new curriculum, a new website. How do you decipher and decide what curriculum is best for your child? Because there are so many things to take into consideration. Is it a religious-based program? You know, you have the age, you have all the different types of learning, whether it's more of, you know, conservative, or you're looking at classical education styles. There's so much to take into consideration. And I know my husband and I, thankfully, are both on the same page, as is my son. Otherwise, this would not work. But we're both like sifting through every night in bed, looking at these curriculums, like which one. So any tips and tricks that you have for anybody when deciding, any resources that you can point us to would be so helpful.
Yes. Okay. There are learning styles. I didn't really follow this in the beginning. I kind of just chose what I liked because I was going to teach it. It's really important, moms, that you choose something that you want to teach, that speaks to you too, because you do have to teach it, coupled with the learning style of your child. Now, that's a whole nother talk. That's a whole nother show to figure out your child's learning styles. I can't get deeply into that, but some kids, they learn by reading, some by hearing. Some kids need to have, things to touch. So that's another show. We can have another show about that later. So coupled with the learning style, something that you want to teach. And there are many resources. There is a website. It's Kathy Duffy's. Her name's Kathy Duffy, and she has really great reviews on curriculum. I always would go and look at her reviews for different curriculum. There are several websites that have reviews on curriculum and that organize it, as does Kathy Duffy, by age and by subject, by grade and subject. ChristianBookDistributors.com does, RainbowResource.com does that also. And if you do a quick Google search on any subject, you can, and write homeschool next to it, you can find many people who have reviews on homeschooling. Now, I have done all those reviews. I spent thousands and thousands of dollars on homeschooling. On homeschooling curriculum. I've changed even sometimes mid-year. To avoid that, I would say that the internet is so awesome right now that you can actually look at samples. A lot of publishers will give you samples. There's no quick way to do this. You have got to do what you guys are doing, up every night, looking on the internet, searching for different curriculum, involving your 14-year-old son. What are you interested in? Let's look for things. So there are more curriculum than ever, thousands of publishers, but there are more resources to kind of try them out for free also. So you go to most publishers, they'll allow you to try them. They want you to purchase their curriculum. So they're going to give you the opportunity to try it out. So you can just call and they'll give you sample pages, usually at maybe 3 weeks at a time. So you can look at it. And again, sometimes it's a hit and miss. Sometimes you find something you love and you use it for years. Everyone's different. That's the beauty of homeschooling. It's all, it's so individualized. So.
Right. Yeah, I remember that Kathy Duffy blog. It was excellent because she has a whole rubric with all the criteria.
Yes.
And the other thing that's helpful is you can go join the Facebook groups of people who are using that curriculum. So you hear firsthand experience from other users of the curriculum. I thought that was very helpful.
And go to homeschool conventions because you can touch it. I know Jersey has a big one. Pennsylvania has a big one. We have one in Rochester, New York too, but there are homeschool conventions usually in the spring. Go touch it, look at it, open the curriculum. That's an opportunity for you to touch it. And also homeschool groups in your state. Go to homeschool group meetings. A lot of these meetings have curriculum swaps, like shares, where we bring our favorite curriculum. We used to do that in our homeschool group, and we would get to talk about our favorites. So that helped a lot of new homeschoolers also.
Yep. So let's talk a little bit about co-ops, because that was a game changer for my family.
Yes.
So, my story is we are both full-time working parents. So as I mentioned earlier, year one was definitely a bumpy road, trying to figure out what to do, what curriculum, and just kind of like getting started. But then year two, we found your co-op, and, I remember sitting there, that meeting in the summer as your children spoke, and I was just in tears of joy that we found such a beautiful co-op, that the curriculum was exactly what I was looking for, and really just in awe of your children. And I remember sitting there with friends saying, if this is a product of homeschooling education, sign me up now, because this is what I want my children to, benefit from, because your children were so poised and so confident and so smart and just really blew us all away. So let's talk a little bit about it. I mean, obviously, then you have the built-in socialization. You have the
Yes,
benefit
you
of being in community. For me, that was such a blessing of being with other families and really being able to influence the sphere around your children. So you know who they're socializing with, how they're spending time with people. You have a better sense of your children. But let's talk a little bit about from an administrator perspective, because now you founded this vibrant community.
Yes.
You have a set curriculum. I think you had to double capacity for this upcoming
We
year, given the
quadrupled, actually,
demand.
4 times
Quadrupled.
bigger than last year. It's incredible what's happened.
So I'd love to share that, because we have parents all over the country now looking to do this. And, maybe it's new for them. Maybe they've never joined a community. Maybe they've never developed a co-op. But, how did you get that started, and how can parents everywhere do similar?
I always say it was God because I don't know how I did it. I don't know. It was for such a time as this. I'm a homeschool mentor in my state. I go to a lot of homeschool conventions, and I do homeschool 101s. And I started getting, my email box was blowing up. Just emails, Facebook posts, people, I got to homeschool, I don't know what to do. And desperate because of in 2019, the vaccine mandates came down. Not the COVID vaccine, the other vaccine mandates, and everyone was getting kicked out of school. We lost 26,000 students, were thrown out of school, and literally had a couple of months to figure out what to do. I was having homeschool meetings in my backyard at my house. Just such an interesting, incredible time. And so I started working. I developed this, not our community, but another community locally. A bunch of parents came to me and said, will you help us do something? So we did something that 2019, we did a kind of what I'm doing this year, but on a much smaller scale. And it was wonderful. And we met so many people, and I was tutoring in community. My kids were not in the community. I was just hired as a tutor. My kids were in a different community doing their homeschooling. And at the end of that year, COVID hit. We went remote. I knew I wasn't going back there because I wanted to have a Christian classical community. I wanted something that my kids were going to be in. I needed my kids with me. I needed to educate my own children. And if I was going to build something, it had to be Christian and it had to be classical. And I just met all the right people. I just met a pastor of a church that I now go to who had the same vision. I met the incredible families who came into our community. We just got our LLC in July, and we were up and running September 14th. So between that was 27 hours a day of work when there's only 24 hours in a day, and just my daughter and I, my husband, my kids, just going nuts, putting things together. That community really was birthed out of a need because of what happened. It would have never happened if everything else didn't happen. And I would have never met you, Aimee. I wouldn't be sitting here right now. It's been so beautiful for the families. We had a year which was horrendous on many, many levels, but we had such a beautiful year in community. My children were working there, and my high school kids were in community. Most of my tutors, my daughter's a tutor, so not her, but the other tutors had children in our community. So we had such ownership of our community because our own kids were in it. And we brought in so many families who had never homeschooled before and just had their kids. It was part-time. It was 2 full days of core a week, 2 days. It wasn't full. It was from 9 to 1. And we had to stay within regulations in our state because our state is the most highly regulated state. One of the most highly, I think, if not the most highly regulated state in the country. And you have to be very careful. You cannot be above 50. It has to be below 50% of the education in a situation where you're paying a tutor and it's not only your kids. So you couldn't go above a certain number of hours, and we were below those hours. But I can't even explain. It was life for us. It kept us going vibrant. The children, to see them just happy and just free and learning. We were able to teach. So it was a really wonderful year. And we're really looking forward to this coming year. Our staff is at 15. It's crazy.
Wow.
I can't even believe what's happened. And it's scary and wonderful. And for such a time as this, it has to happen, and anyone can do it. It just takes work. I always say, look at the website. I went and I looked at other people who were doing it. I looked, I looked at other people. I talked to people. I met a woman in Texas who does this university model school concept. And I had long conversations with her. I read her book. I just, you just have to take the initiative. So I know a lot of people want to do it, and they can do it. They just have to do it. And every community will have its own flavor. It doesn't have to be Christian and classical like mine is. It can be a conventional setting, but this is what I wanted to do. And this is what the families in our community, they didn't even know what they wanted, but then when they got it, they wanted it. So I was, and I always say to people who want to start something like this, just be very intentional. You've got to it's step by step, and just don't be afraid. Got to be fearless and just do it.
I honestly think that everything that you just said is exactly what people need to hear, because so many parents feel like their back is up against the wall. They don't.
It's not. Yeah, it's not.
Not. And out of necessity, a parent's power, being able to take it back and say, you know what? The school system is not serving me, so I'm going to create my own. I am going to build community and really create this place where my kids can get the things that I want them to have, to be able to live the way that I feel is important, the values and the education and the morals and the community. It's amazing. So everything that you brought to the table tonight was so needed, so important, and so perfectly timed for what we're dealing with in this crazy world that we're living in. Just know that you've given so many people so much hope that they can, because so many people say there's no way that I can do it. It's not possible. I'm not able to. And, I always say to people, if not you, then who? If not now, then when? Because if it is not clear right now that we are in big trouble with our education system and we need to make some waves, and we'll talk a little bit about walkout week later on in the show, because we want to give people options. Not everybody physically can homeschool for whatever reasons with jobs, and we totally get that. So we want to make it something where every single person that feels the way that we do can take a stand to show these school systems that in order to retain their student populations, we have to make some changes.
Yes, absolutely.
Cassandra, we're so thankful to have you come on tonight. It has been such a pleasure, and we absolutely need to have you back, because I know that I have so many more questions that we didn't get to. So I absolutely want to have you come back and share more. We're going to be devoting a lot more time to homeschooling resources and giving people the things that they need to do this. So stay tuned if you have more questions. I know there were a lot of questions that came in. We will be having you back on. We'll figure out a date, and we're so appreciative that you were here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Have a great rest of the day, and good luck with the upcoming year. I'm sure it's going to be amazing success.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So we have more for you. We had a whole bunch of inspiration, and now we need to move into the information, because for a lot of people, the informational portions of this, being able to figure out exactly what this looks like, what the laws are, what the rules are in your state, it's overwhelming. So our next guest is going to speak to all of it. TJ Smith he's homeschooled since starting in the 2nd grade through high school and graduation. For much of that time, his family served as missionaries in Haiti. He earned his Juris Doctor from Oak Brook College of Law while serving as a legal assistant at HSLDA. Now, as an HSLDA staff attorney, TJ assists members across the country with legal questions and challenges to their homeschool freedom. TJ and his wife, Susan, homeschool their 7 children. Let me just say that again. They homeschool their 7 children. So if you're thinking you can't, you absolutely can. I'm so excited to bring you on, TJ. Thank you so much for being here. Oh, you're on mute still.
Well,
there you go.
Sorry about that, Stephanie.
No worries.
Thank you so much. And certainly it is a lot to do with my wife. She does the vast majority of the homeschooling. I'm just the principal and sometimes the Board of Education all putting together. So.
It takes a team. It takes an army, as I always say. I know Aimee had some technical difficulties. I think she got kicked off, so she'll be back on shortly. But yeah, I think so many parents right now are really considering the option of homeschool for the first time. I know for myself, like I said earlier, I never imagined myself to do anything other than send him to school, pick him up, do his homework, and all that good stuff. But we're seeing people become aware of all of the issues that are happening. And I think one of the things that we need to talk about is some of the regulations that apply. As an overview, like I know each state is different, but state requirements vary. I know from just New York to New Jersey, there's a huge difference in homeschool laws. And it can be really overwhelming to figure out what they are, how they apply to your children. And I think that's why HSLDA is such an amazing resource. So can you give us a high-level overview of some of the differences in the homeschooling regulations around the country?
Yeah, absolutely. And, just as Cassandra mentioned earlier, everyone makes their decision to homeschool for a different reason. And certainly right now we have a lot of families who are making that decision to homeschool their children because of the circumstances that they're seeing either in the school, in their community, maybe even in their family. And I think a lot of the regulations are going to be highly dependent on where you're starting. So if your children are already in the public school, you may need to be aware of, what you need to do to withdraw your child, to notify the school that, hey, they're not coming back this fall. Or if school has already started, what you need to do in the middle of school to begin homeschooling. Some states, you need to submit that withdrawal form and physically withdraw your child from the school. In other states, it's a much more easy process. I know that there are a couple of states where if you have an unexcused absences, after 3 unexcused absences, your child could potentially be truant. So it's very important if your child is already in the public school to make sure that you know what you need to do to physically withdraw them from that school. Now, if your child is just beginning, or maybe you're coming from a private school situation, you may not need to worry about that withdrawal part. Most parents, about 2/3 of the states across the country do require parents to provide some type of notice either to their local school district that they're homeschooling, maybe a regional educational entity like in Oregon, the Education Service District. Some states it's to the actual State Department of Education like Louisiana or North Carolina. And there are a few states that don't require any particular notification. So again, a lot of this is going to be dependent on where you're starting. Whether you're starting in the public school, you're going to have to make sure to be aware of some of those things. And then if you're just starting fresh or from a private school, again, everyone typically will have to provide notice regardless of where you start in most states. Now, even when you have to provide those notices, though, the next thing that a lot of parents say, well, what are the subjects? What am I required to do? Am I required to teach certain subjects? And so I would tell you that almost all states require you to at least teach similar subjects or the same subjects that would be taught in the public school. But one thing that I would make a very clear distinction about, and I think Cassandra has already mentioned this, and you've already talked about this in your show today, is that you get to choose the curriculum. You get to choose the method of how you're going to be teaching your child at home. You may be required to teach English. You may be required to teach math and science and social studies, but you get to teach your child in the manner that meets your needs and their needs, and you get to choose the curriculum. So a lot of times, you have parents who want to use online programs. A lot of families right now are making decisions simply because online programs are not working for their child. And so you have the ability to use a more traditional approach with textbooks or curriculum materials, more lesson plans. But also, as Cassandra mentioned, you have the opportunity to be more eclectic. If that fits your family, that fits your model, maybe the needs of your child, you can be more eclectic. You can be more child driven. So there's no state in the country, regardless of the 50 different laws and rules across the country, there's no state that restricts you as far as the curriculum that you have to use or the method in which you teach. Now, you are absolutely correct. There are several states that do require a lot of you. And New York, I would absolutely concur with you that New York is the most regulated state in the country. You have to submit a notice of intent, and then you have to submit your plan of instruction. Once that plan is deemed to be in compliance with New York law, you then submit 4 quarterly reports and an annual assessment at the end of the year. So New York is the most regulated state, and all the other states have some lesser or sometimes nearly no type of documentation that you have to provide, but all states require you to educate your children. And obviously, as a parent, if you're making this decision, I think, as we've talked about, parents who make the decision to homeschool, they want their children to be successful. I have 7 kids, and I want each one of them to be successful, just as Cassandra has her 5 children. We want our children to be successful. I don't want to be supporting my child when they're 40 years old. I want them to be able to have their own family and be off supporting themselves. So every state has requirements to teach your child, but how you have to do that varies. And so we talked a little bit about assessment tests in New York. Only about half of the states require you to do assessment tests. So that is something to kind of keep in mind. Many parents, particularly in the first year or two, they want to know, how are we doing? Are we being successful in our academic educational program? I fully agree with Cassandra that a lot of times, you do need to take that first year to kind of heal from maybe the institutional education that your child's been in. But still, I think there is a need for many, many parents to know how their children are progressing. And there are a lot of options out there, evaluations that can meet the needs of your child that you can do at home. But only about half of the states actually require you to do testing. And even if less than that, require you to submit the test in. So you need to know what state your state requires. And so, we don't have, the opportunity to talk about all the different areas, but the best way that I can tell you to find out what your state requires is to go to HSLDA, and that's the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. I've had the privilege of working at HSLDA for over 19 years now. And, HSLDA has an abundance of resources. You can look at your state and at a glance see what laws are applicable to you and your state in your decision to homeschool. You can click on a map, you can see the exact requirements, you can look at detailed analysis and answers of questions that you may have. And so you can find that out at www.hslda.org/legal if you want to look at the laws. But the website's got a lot more information than that. Of course, you can also give us a call at during normal working hours, East Coast time, 540-338-5600. And any one of our staff can help point you in the right direction so that you can know exactly what your state requires.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, TJ. Yes, I'm sorry. I had Wi-Fi issues. It booted me off. No, so that's wonderful. And I think it's really important for parents, like you said, get on hslda.org, understand your state laws. You do have to abide by these. I guess if there's any other words you have in terms of, the benefits of joining as a member, perhaps, we're facing a time now where there's so much government overreach. Parents get concerned about, possible, visits from CPS or trouble with truancy laws or just any meddling from the government in their private lives as they now are homeschoolers. So you can maybe talk about the benefit of being a member of HSLDA from that perspective, and also just speak to any other resources or information you think is critical for first-time homeschoolers.
Well, first of all, I want to say that, as a homeschooling family, you're not any more susceptible to get, additional scrutiny. I think that's one, myth, as we were talking earlier, that homeschoolers are more susceptible. But I think it is very real, particularly in this day and age, that there are contacts. Parents make the decision to homeschool and their local school officials are contacting them. I just talked with a family last week where they just made that decision and their local school sent somebody out to check on them because they weren't sure that they knew all the great programs that were in their public school. And they were trying to dissuade them from making this decision, the freedom to educate their children at home. So obviously, one of the main benefits of HSLDA is that we have a dedicated legal team, regardless of whatever state you live in. We have a dedicated legal team, an attorney, legal assistant, sometimes several legal assistants to assist you as you walk through this journey, so that there's never a time where you don't know the laws, that you don't have that assistance when you need it. We were talking a little bit earlier about, some of the parents are making the decisions to pull out because of the online, remote learning. It's just not working for their children. In fact, I talked with parents last year in New York, and their child, their 6-year-old child was in remote classes 6 hours a day. And their teacher, mom and dad were saying, look, he can't do 6 hours in front of the computer screen. He's bored to death. We'll do the work at home. Just let us do every other day. The principal was okay with it, but the teacher ended up contacting CPS on that family because they were doing every other day. And dad got so scared that, he worked upstate New York. And so he was taking his son with him, to spend time with him, but he was having him log on to that remote learning. And the teacher, again, called CPS because he was in a car, strapped safely in his car seat, appropriately secured, but yet the teacher reported him. So I think a lot of parents are seeing similar situations, frustrations out of that remote learning. And we have the ability here at HSLDA to help you, walk you through those situations, whether it's a attendance officer, a school liaison officer, a police officer, social worker. They don't happen every day, but when you get those contacts, we here at the Homeschool Legal Defense Association can provide you with that, daily assistance to provide you with, how and tips on how to get out. And we can even talk with these individuals, write letters. Our commitment to you as a homeschooling family is obviously to defend and protect your right to teach your children at home, even in court if that's necessary. Now, but besides the legal, side of things, a lot of what we do is more practical help. Obviously, as Cassandra has already said, it's vital for you as a parent to have, that practical experience. Many of you, probably more of you now, know someone who's homeschooling than ever before. It used to be back when I was taught at home, my mom didn't know anybody, and this was, in I'm ashamed to admit, but this would have been in the mid 80s. My mom didn't know anybody in the community. It was very hard to find. But now you'll find that over 1 out of 2 people know someone who's homeschooling. And so I'm sure within your community, you can find someone who's homeschooling, maybe somebody who's been homeschooling for a few years. And one thing that we have at HSLDA is a list of groups. You should start out certainly with your state homeschool organization. Many of them have local groups that you can connect with. And finding groups is just a great resource. But at HSLDA, we also have consultants. We have consultants for early years, for struggling learning, special needs children. And then we also have high school consultants. And these are individuals that can talk with you, walk you through the unique situations that you have in your family or that your child has, and they can recommend some resources or point you in the right direction so that you can find some of the information that you might need. Besides, obviously, those types of help and assistance, we also work with state leaders all across the country in protecting homeschooling freedom. As I'm sure you've seen in New York recently with striking down the religious exemption for vaccines. Legislation is very important. And one of the things that we do at HSLDA is monitor legislation in all 50 states on what is going on as far as homeschooling. Are they trying to regulate homeschooling? We actively work to provide greater freedom for parents. We've been trying for many years to get greater freedom in New York. One day, I hope that we can report that New York has greater freedom for homeschooling. But that's something that we do here at HSLDA. And finally, in addition to all that, we also provide and compile research on homeschooling, because I think it's vital for either the public at large, legislators, the media to know, how is homeschooling doing? They've been kind of buying into a lot of these myths over the years that, homeschooling is only done in one-room schoolhouses with no electricity, and people are just not socialized. But yet, what you'll find within the homeschooling community is a vibrant, active community. And most studies say that homeschoolers are in fact more active in their community than their typical public school or private school counterparts. So we help compile research. We've even helped commission studies into homeschooling to document the progress and the achievement that homeschoolers do. Even getting into college, I mean, that's a big issue and question that we don't even really have time to touch right now, but we help families all the time, homeschool graduates who are getting into college, getting employment, and we help educate the employer, the college, on what that state law requires, and to help document the fact that they are in a legitimate program that's just as adequate or just as sufficient as any other legal educational option in that state. So those are just some of the things that we do. I mean, really, I would say anything that has to do with homeschooling, HSLDA is involved in, and it is really through pioneers and hard-working parents. We're standing with them as you teach your children at home.
It's so valuable, the service that you provide. So thank you so much for being here, for sharing so much information. I know that there's so much more. So if you are looking at the potential of homeschooling, you definitely want to check out hslda.org. Go on, do your homework, do your research. Aimee and I are working vigorously on a homeschooling resources document for all of you who are interested. So stay tuned for that and an article in the Defender. And thank you, TJ, for taking time to come here tonight and speak.
My pleasure.
And share so much information. It will definitely have both of you back on because, like you said, the need for this is growing by the minute.
Well, my pleasure. Anytime. Just let me know.
Thank you, TJ. Great to see you again. Take care.
All right.
Thank you. Take care. All right.
So much info, right?
But I feel like we could have gone on for so much longer because there's so much out there to talk about. And comments. I mean, we got so many comments and questions about special needs children. So there's definitely a need to come back with these two guests and discuss more. But for now, we need to provide the resources because for those of you who are struggling, who feel like you don't have anywhere to turn, Children's Health Defense has a plethora of information, so much so that sometimes it's hard to find. So that's why we're here to guide you through all the things that are right there at your fingertips. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and Aimee is going to take you through all of the things that are there for you right now. If you want to go along with us, know that you can.
Great.
All right, here we go.
So if you are on our homepage on childrenshealthdefense.org, first things first, sign up for Defender, upper right, free sign up. You click there, just give your email and get all of our information, excellent articles. We are under such censorship and attack of information and truth. And so it's really important that you sign up and you're getting real news and truth in your inbox every day. If you scroll down a little bit more on the homepage, we have our emergency campaign. If you click through there, there's going to be 3 buckets: employer mandates, K through 12, and college. Each area pushes out to another page where you have abundant amount of resources, information, tools, template letters that help you to push back on these mandates that you may be facing, whether you're a college student, whether your child's K through 12, or whether you're facing it yourself with your employer. So very lengthy list in each of those of resources, information, and tools that can help you push back on these mandates. So know that you do have a choice. Also on our homepage is our advocacy portal. If you click Take Action, that will always bring you to the latest action alert, whether it be legislative news, a petition that's going around, anywhere that we need to call action to, you will see that there as well. As a reminder, our show is every Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, Community Corner. If you go to CHD Live, that's where you'll catch us there, as well as all of our other shows, The Defender with Bobby and Mary and Polly later in the week. So stay tuned each week for all of our shows on CHD Live. And lastly, we have our community page. If you click and go to The Defender, you can scroll down and then go to the community section. And within that, you'll see the latest events, what's happening from state to state, all around the world, local activities, as well as any type of articles, information, calendar, events, rallies, etc. All of that is in our community section. So stay tuned there as well. And now I think, Stephanie, you're going to scroll down on that same page, right, and share a little bit about our walkout week.
Yes, let's just see if we can find it. So for those of you that have been following Aimee and I, we had a very exciting day on Friday. We were on Steve Bannon's The War Room announcing our walkout week. So you can see right here, the Walkout Week Pledge is your opportunity to opt in to the walkout that's happening from September 13th to September 20th. It is a 5-day walkout, no matter what state you're in. If homeschooling is not something that's an option for you, alternative learning is not something that works for you and your family, the idea of this is to give you the opportunity to go ahead and be able to have your voice heard, because so many people are up in arms about all the mandates that have already happened and the ones that we know are coming down the pike. So it's time to show the strength and power of parents, because without parents sending their children to schools, there are no schools. So if you cannot do what we talked about and homeschool your children completely, this is your opportunity to have them home and to take them out and show them the power of peaceful non-compliance, showing up at protests all around your state. We're going to have people who will be leading efforts in every single state. And if you're someone who's interested in leading those efforts, we want to hear from you. We want to know that you are stepping up as a leader. We have plenty of people that are doing so all around the country. So know that this is something that will make a difference. It will show the strength of our numbers and the power of our voices. So mark your calendar for September 13th. Go to the community section, take the pledge. And what we're asking everybody to do is once you have the pledge signed, please print it out. Take a picture of yourself with the pledge and hashtag Walkout Week, hashtag The Parents Rising, hashtag My Child's My Choice, and post it on social media to gain some traction on these platforms. We know that we're so censored. If you have a need to reach out to Aimee or I, any protests in your area, anything that's happening that we need to know about, we want to hear from you. It's really important for us to have the opportunity to connect with all of you. So anything that's happening in your neck of the woods, please feel free to reach out to us at advocacy@childrenshealthdefense.org. We will be checking that email box. Go on, take your pledge, mark your calendars, and get to experience the power of what happens when parents say, enough, we're not taking it anymore. And then you'll have the opportunity to connect with like-minded, like-hearted people in your communities and just explore what the possibilities could be from there, because so much opens up when you finally take a stand and say no. So those are the things that we're really excited about. And this was such an action-packed show with so much information. We hope that you get resources, information, and of course the inspiration to believe that you can. Because you can, whatever it is that's calling to you, just trust your heart. Know that this is such an important time to be a defender of children's health, to be a defender of truth, to be a defender of freedom, because it is certainly not free. And the things that we do now in this moment in history will determine what the future generations are dealing with. So make sure that you're standing up, that you're showing up, that you're rising up and being the change that you wish to see in the world. It is so important right now. We are so blessed and so thankful to be able to be here with you every week. We'll be back next week at 5 p.m. with more great information to help support you during this really crazy and challenging time in the world. Know that you are not alone. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. Stay tuned for more info.
We'll be back next week. All right. Take care.